I've been able to bring my passion for music and DJing into data science. Leaving Facebook, I took a pay cut to join this startup company. You know, in software, there's books like Cracking the Coding Interview, there's HackerRank, there's LeetCode. In product, there's product management, there's other websites to help you with PMs. I was like, why is there not this kind of resources there for data science? So that's kind of what...
Hey everyone, welcome back to Learning Bridge. I hope you guys are doing good and staying safe. So this podcast is especially dedicated to aspiring data scientists, to motivate them and to help them to land into their dream job. And our guest for today's podcast is Mr. Nick Singh. And guys, his journey is truly amazing, really inspiring, really motivating and pure gold. And trust me, after watching this podcast, cracking data science interviews will look like a piece of cake. I can guarantee that. Nick is someone who truly loves music, and because of that, he was actually into DJing. And after that, he took super interesting turn his career, worked in companies like Google, Facebook, SafeGraph. After that, he quit his job to help the aspiring data scientist 1000%. And how is he actually doing it? Because he wrote most selling book for data scientists, which is the Data Science Interview. You can also explore this book and also the free resources which Nick has created. All the important links will be in the description. Don't forget to check that out. And after watching this podcast, do let me know your thoughts in the comment section. What did you feel about this podcast? What did you feel about Nick and his journey? And what were the top 3 meaningful insights which you get from this podcast? And if this podcast even help you 1%, then make sure to like this video, share it with your friends. And if you're new to my channel, then don't forget to subscribe and press the notification icon. And guys, one special announcement for the software engineers who are preparing for their job interviews, and even for the students who are preparing for their campus placement. And if you are looking for the free resources, then here this amazing platform Coding Ninjas can help you in that journey. And their new initiative, which is really great, named as CodeStudio. And one amazing part is every resource is free here. They have made it free for you, like your preparation, your journey. So you can even see some really amazing things related to interview guide for the product-based companies, DSA, competitive programming, Java, C++, DBMS, Python, JavaScript, fundamentals of the web development, and many other important technologies, tech stack related things. And the free content is available here. So I have provided the link in the description. Make sure you check this platform because these resources are completely free and really amazing content. And these free resources will definitely help you in your interview preparation journey. All right. So, hey, welcome everybody. And thank you so much, Nick, for joining this podcast. So I'm pretty sure many of you might be following Nick on the social media platforms like LinkedIn. He keeps on posting some really good content regarding the data science. But if you are not following, probably after watching this complete podcast, you will definitely do that. And I know you guys were requesting me to bring someone from the data science domain who can actually guide us because there is some noise in the market and people are really confused. At least the aspiring data scientists, they are really confused where to start, how to crack the interviews and all. So he's the awesome person to answer these questions. So it would be great, Nick, if you can actually introduce yourself to my audience and a little bit about your background.
Absolutely. Shashank, thank you so much for having me on this channel. It was great to connect on LinkedIn, and I'm so excited to be doing this today. So my background, so I grew up in Virginia, here in the USA. My parents are both from India, in Lucknow and Bhagalpur. Growing up, I always loved math. I got into coding a little bit in high school. And in college, I was thinking, what's the combination of coding and math? So in college, I studied at the University of Virginia, systems engineering, which is kind of a mix of applied math, a little business, some coding, and I also minored in computer science. In college, I did a data science internship for the Naval Intelligence Research Lab. I interned at Microsoft as a software developer. I worked as a data engineer at Google's Nest Labs. That's their IoT division. And I started out my career as a software engineer on Facebook's growth team, where I used A/B tests and did data-driven experiments all day to figure out how can Facebook onboard users better, retain them, and engage them way better. So it was a very data-driven software engineering role.
So I do remember when I interacted with you for the very first time, and I also stalked you on Instagram, and I stalked your LinkedIn profile. I got to know about very interesting thing, you are really passionate about DJing, right? And even your Instagram handle is like DJ Lil Singh, so that's quite cool.
Yeah.
And so interesting question here is very interested and soft corner for DJing, but how did you start your professional journey as in the data science domain? Why not full-time DJing as a profession?
Right, dude, here's the answer. Desi parents, man. You think my Desi parents are going to say, hey, we born you in America, taught you all this math and computer science, you're going to become a DJ? Nah, not a chance. So it's still a really fun hobby for me. And what's really cool is I've been able to bring my passion for music and DJing into data science. For example, in college, I ran a music startup called Rapstock.io. which is sort of like fantasy football, where you kind of drafting, instead of drafting football players onto your fantasy team, you got to draft hip-hop artists onto your fantasy label. Meaning, you get to pick, hey, who do you think is a better rapper or not? And based on Spotify streaming data, I was able to quantify how good is a rapper or not. So this way you could say, oh, I want to go long on Drake, and I want to short Lil Nas X. Right? So this was kind of like a market. So I've always been interested in music, so I figured it's still my hobby. I do it for fun, and wherever I can, if as a side project or just to geek out, I still stay in touch with like music tech. But yeah, DJing is just a side hobby for now. Data science is a full-time thing. And your audience might like it. What kind of music do I DJ? I love to mix hip-hop music with Bhangra and Bollywood music, and then also listen to a lot of Spanish reggaeton. So it's a very international mix of different languages flying around. So that's where I have my fun creative style.
So if somebody wants to check out your music or these things, where we can find that?
Yeah, you should just follow me on Instagram. These days I haven't been doing as much because, COVID killed the nightclub industry and all that. So I'm like not doing that many parties or anything. But I do have a SoundCloud, but it's very old. So for embarrassing reason, I'm not going to shout it out. The best place to connect with me right now these days is to either check out the book, Ace the Data Science Interview, or hit me up on LinkedIn, Nick Singh, or visit my website, nicksingh.com.
Cool.
I don't want to plug my music. It's been a while.
Cool. So like all the important links will be in the description. Make sure you check that out. Interesting thing again, like after completing your education, right, you started your career as a software engineer, right? Then suddenly like now, I mean, at least in current state, you are full-time into the data science. So how did this shift actually happen? And during this transition, or even like after completing your education, what kind of challenges, ups and downs, or confusing things you faced in that journey?
Yeah, Shashank, great question. So my career has been definitely kind of weird because I have been jumping through different things. So if you think about it, because I interned as a data scientist, and then I also interned as a data engineer, my first job was a software engineer on a very data-driven team at Facebook. So all day I was writing SQL queries, I was running A/B tests, I was thinking about the product direction and using data to back up the product roadmap. I've kind of always been straddling data in different ways. And even my major was one that required a lot of math classes, statistics classes, because it wasn't pure software engineering that I studied in school. It was systems engineering, which honestly these days is called data science. It's almost like we didn't call that stuff data science because there's no undergrad major in data science when I went to school in 2013. So what attracts me to data science is, man, again, the combo of math and coding, the ability to make data-driven decisions, because man, I just love helping people make better decisions through data, because it's so easy to make wrong decisions when you don't have data or you don't think about things logically. And this extends not just in a personal life, but like in industry too, right? So if you think about it, I had mentioned Rapstock.io. This was to quantify that feeling of, hey, I like this rapper more than this rapper. And then someone says, no, you have no taste. This rapper is actually way better. How do you quantify that? It's always coming to like, hey, whoever is better at picking, I want to reward them. I want them to be able to quantify that they're better at picking, right? Because stock market is about picking stocks, and whoever picks better makes more money. I wanted to make that in the game. And same way, everything I do about data these days is like, hey, if I can teach more people data science and how to think in a data-driven manner, I'm making the world a better place by helping people make better decisions for their lives and the organizations they run.
Nick has worked with some amazing companies, right? Microsoft, Google, Facebook, SafeGraph. And now like you left your professional journey, you left your job and like desperately trying to help aspiring data scientists to land into their dream jobs. So what was the main reason and motivation behind this kind of decision? I mean, just leaving leaving your professional job and high paying job. I mean, dude, someone needs courage for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the truth is, when I left Facebook, I joined a small startup called SafeGraph. And they're a alternative data company. So they'd collect location data from smartphones and use that, create aggregated insights that hedge funds, retail analytics companies, insurance companies would use to understand how do people move around. Okay, and that was a small startup. And that guy grew like a rocket ship. And I learned so much and I had so much fun. So I knew that, hey, after joining a startup, leaving Facebook, I took a pay cut to join this startup company because they was offering much more growth opportunity. And, maybe it's not a pay cut in the future, depending on how my options come out. Maybe on just cash, it was a pay cut. Maybe down the line, 5 years from now, as SafeGraph continues to grow, it'll be worth it, even monetarily. But certainly on a learning perspective, it was really worth it. So I knew like, hey, if I'm going to continue my learning journey, it's time I start something myself. And, I've always been someone who's interested in business, my DJ business that I did in high school where I'm doing all these parties, my rap stock, that little startup I tried in college. I knew I wanted to do something more entrepreneurial. So when COVID-19 hit, man, the world's going crazy. People are getting their jobs rescinded. Internships are getting canceled. People are getting laid off. And I was already someone who was informally a career coach. I was posting on LinkedIn already. I already had a blog. I had already a newsletter, just for fun, not monetized. Just literally, I was just putting out some insights just so I could share with people my own insights from working at some of these really big tech giants. So when COVID-19 hit, I left my very expensive rent in San Francisco and I moved back home with my parents in Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C. So now I don't have rent to make, and I have some money saved up, and people are losing their jobs. And it's something I'm interested in solving anyway. Because even before COVID, I didn't think of it, people are losing their job, let's do this. I'm like, I'm already trying to help people. This is a big need. And, in software, there's books like Cracking the Coding Interview, there's HackerRank, there's LeetCode. In product, there's product management, there's other websites to help you with PMs. I was like, why is there not this kind of resources there for data science? So that's kind of what put me down the path of, hey, I want to build things to help data, machine learning, data analyst folks also in their career. So that's kind of what landed me into that little spot, even though my background could have been for software or other things too.
And now we'll be talking about this book, guys, and make sure you book your copy of this top-notch book. Link will be in the description, right? And Nick will be talking about this amazing book, right? So let's deep dive into that. Like, you have written this best-selling book, Ace the Data Science Interview, and your concept was to the point, because there are a lot of things available for the software engineering, cracking these system design interviews, but nothing as such related to data science work. So what did actually inspire you to write such kind of book? And did you see any kind of gap that was the main reason to come up with this idea, writing book and putting all your knowledge into it?
Absolutely. So I want to just shout out my co-author as well. So it's definitely not just me. So my co-author, 𝗂𝗂𝗀𝗂, he's my friend from high school. We grew up together here in Northern Virginia. Then we were roommates at Facebook. I was a software engineer on the growth team. He was a data scientist on Facebook groups, working and supporting to fight spam and abuse on Facebook groups. So while we were roommates, later he left Facebook to work as a quant on Wall Street. So he's worked in hedge funds and things like that. So while working with him and talking to him, because he's one of my closest friends, we're just like, the same thing. Why does this not exist for data science, right? So we just thought, and we never really jumped on it. We've been thinking about this for a long time, but again, with COVID hitting and me deciding, hey, I'm moving back home, maybe this is the time to quit my job and try to pursue one of my dreams, and there's a gap. And Kevin, he's a phenomenal technical mind because he's like a data scientist, now he's a quant on Wall Street, all that jazz. So he's a very quantitative, solid guy put together with my more well-rounded experience across software and data engineering, plus my just penchant for coaching. We knew that hey, we'd make a good team and this is a good space, and then the rest is history. So we just worked on it for about a year, and it came out August of 2020, so 2021.
So Nick, it would be great if you can just throw some light on the content which you have covered, right? It would be great for the audience as well to understand more about this amazing book.
Sure, So the first half of the book, which is about 40-50 pages, talks about kind of the job hunt, like how do we job hunt better? So I talk about the 4 resume principles to live by for data scientists. I talk all about cold emailing, which is something I'm super passionate about. So a cold email, Shashank, is where you write a message to someone you don't know. Whether that's a LinkedIn DM or it's on Twitter or even an email, it's considered cold because someone didn't introduce you to them. You just kind of wrote that message out of the blue. So that chapter is all about sending cold emails, because cold emailing is actually what landed me my last job at Safegraph. In the book, even, I have a screenshot of the exact email I sent to that CEO of the company that got me hired, weeks later. And same way, I've actually used cold emailing to get interviews at Airbnb as well as Snapchat and Cloudflare. So it's a technique I've seen that's worked for me, and a lot of the people who read the book too. In the last few months, people have been reaching out to me saying, wow, this is awesome. So that first few chapters is about that, plus portfolio projects. Shashank, you remember how in the beginning you mentioned, wow, I combined DJing with data science and how that was kind of cool? That's what I tell people to do in the portfolio projects chapter of how do you stand out as a candidate through portfolio projects. Because it's not just about building the most technologically crazy project and pitching that. It's actually about combining your passion along with data science to show, wow, this person's actually like a cool person and they're interested and for fun, they're just hacking away on things. and using data to do it, you know? So that book is all about that, because actually when you craft your portfolio projects really nicely, it helps you in your behavioral interview questions, right? Because there's always a casual like, hey, what do you like to do for fun? Or tell me about a project you did. And other people will talk about some really boring school project that was assigned to them with no personality or flavor. Others might talk about a Kaggle project that everyone's seen, like predict who survives on the Titanic. Okay, are you passionate about the Titanic? No, that's just like the first assignment on Kaggle. Or they might talk about something like handwriting recognition with the MNIST data set. It's a very classic neural networks project in computer vision to say, hey, can you write down digits, and can you say 1 is 1, 2 is 2. So this is a very classic project, but tells me nothing about your interest. And everyone's done it. If you've ever taken a computer vision 101 class, you've done that project. So that chapter is all about portfolio projects, and then the last part is about behavioral interview questions, because there is an art to doing well in behavioral interview questions. Yes, technical stuff is very difficult, but you don't want to play yourself on the behavioral part either, because there is an art to like doing well there. So that's the first 50 pages of the book, these kind of more soft skills chapters and more about branding and marketing yourself on the job hunt. So the last half of the book, you know, and it's half, but it's really like a logical half, but it's really the meat of the book. It's like 250 pages. That covers 201 real interview questions asked by FAANG, Silicon Valley startups, Wall Street. Plus, it just gives you really brief crash courses into the main topics that data science, data analysts, and machine learning interviews cover. So what are those topics? It starts out with probability, then statistics, then machine learning, SQL, coding, product sense, and my favorite chapter, the last one, it's case studies. Case studies are these really kind of open-ended questions that are asked to data scientists that kind of combine all these different concepts. It's kind of akin to in software engineering, they have a system design interview, which is kind of more holistic about how would you solve a problem. That's like what case study interviews are like for data scientists and ML engineers, where they kind of just pose you with like, how would you build Uber's surge pricing algorithm? Or what are the key metrics you'd use to quantify the success of Facebook dating? You know, there's no right answer, and you have to know something about Facebook dating, you have to know about metrics, you have to think about the product UX UI, you have to think about what are the business stakeholders interested in, you have to think about how does Facebook as a company monetize. That's my favorite chapter, and it's the last one. And I just want to give a quick plug, guys. You can get the book on Amazon, but if you're viewing this video in a country like India, it's not out in India yet, unfortunately. So there's high custom fees, so you can still buy it, but it's quite expensive. So I'm working to get it out in India, and people for free can get a preview anyways of what I talk about in the book for free on @nicksingh.com, where I have a free 9-day interview crash course where I basically just talk about all these technical projects and like give excerpts, as well as my own blog. @nicksingh.com has blog posts of SQL questions that I've already solved and ML questions and things like that. So there's already a lot of free resources, but I'm working to get it in India as soon as possible as well.
I think that would be great when it will be in India. I mean, as you said, like it is available, but will be a bit expensive just because of the custom fee and all. But I think you guys can at least leverage those free resources which Nick has created. All the links will be in the description. Do check that out. All right. So Nick, like for newbies, what should be the ideal way or baby steps to move into data science domain? I mean, I can feel for the fresh grads, they are really confused because even the companies are mixing the roles and responsibilities of different job profiles, and now that's the point they are getting confused what they actually need to do to become a good data scientist.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It is so confusing, right? Because you hit the nail on the head. It's like what one company calls a data analyst, another calls a data scientist, and then some data scientists are more like machine learning engineers. So it's really confusing in this industry. So I'm going to figure out about all of that stuff. So first, I'm going to do a quick plug. I have an article about this called The Breaking into Data Science Guide, which you guys can check in the show notes, which covers about how to do it. But let me give you a quick and dirty, because I mean, that's a long article, but let me just tell you the quick and dirty of how should one break in. Focusing on hard technical skills is great. 2 ways to just think about logically is your more stat side and your coding side. In coding, yes, you can optimize for learning R or pandas or this or that, but just generally code more. That's the best way to get better at coding, you know? And I'm talking as an actual software engineer who's done the whole FAANG thing, like for coding, like just code more, build more. Okay, that's how you get better at coding. On the stats side, you're gonna have to sit there and grind out some math. And you know, honestly, I would just let people know to not get too overwhelmed. Sometimes to be a proper data scientist or machine learning person, you need to know stats, linear algebra, probability, multivariable calculus, maybe even differential equations. That's so overwhelming. And to be honest, I took all those classes in college, But by the time I graduated, I'd forgotten about some of the stuff I'd already taken, you know? And like right now, do I know my differential equations or do I know how to do a triple integral? No, I don't, you know, or I could figure it out though, but I don't know it off the top of my head. And I think people get too overwhelmed, like, wow, to do data science, I need to know like 4 or 5 different college level math classes. I think focus on statistics, focus on understanding statistics, and you know what? Try to think about it more intuitively and less with math. Try to think about it like, what's a confidence interval? What's a problem it's trying to solve? What's the central limit theorem? Just like theoretically, like what is it? What do these things mean? How do we have confidence about a decision? Oh, okay, that's related to confidence intervals. Okay, how do we test that? Oh, that's hypothesis testing. So rather than getting nitty gritty of like, hey, how do I do this or that, or when do I use a chi-square test versus a z test versus a this test, t test, two-sided, paired, whatever. Forget all of that stuff. Just first start to think about things more intuitively and just focus on statistics, focusing on getting good at coding, whether that's R or Python. Focus on those 2 things. That's the best way to break in. Focus on those skills, but I would say for as much learning you do as much building too. 50% actual like learning, watching someone do a video, doing a math book, textbook problem, but 50% for sure needs to be like, yo, you just take a data set and you start exploring it. You start trying to find some things out. And I think people get overwhelmed with like, oh, how do I do that if I don't know Python or I don't know TensorFlow or I don't know these crazy packages? Fam, you can use Excel to do some of this stuff. You can actually do regression in Excel. You can use Excel to like do hypothesis testing. You can explore data in Excel. So it should never be an issue of like, oh, wow, to do data science, I need to know 19 things, and that's why I'm not building. I'm instead trying to learn these 19 things, which you'll never learn in good enough to feel confident to start actually building. So at some level, you just have to like, for as much time you spend learning, try to build with real data sets. And Kaggle, what a gift that is to the world. There's going to be a data set on everything and anything there. So people always ask me, Nick, what should I explore? What kind of data should I look at? I'm like, what are you interested in as a person, right? Like, if you like basketball, there's basketball data sets. If you like hip-hop music, there's hip-hop music data sets. Shashank, I love Indian food. I love my chicken tikka masala, tandoori paneer. I love it all. There's a data set of Indian food recipes of like 10,000 recipes and what ingredients are in each of those recipes on Kaggle that someone has scraped. You can do a quick analysis that requires no machine learning, no complicated stuff to say what are the top ingredients used in Indian cooking. That's just a SQL query to find what are the top ingredients, right? Yeah. It's not nothing crazy. There's not anything crazy, right? But that's something already interesting. Like, oh, what are the top ingredients? You know, maybe if you're interested in natural language processing, you can have people add in some, maybe make your own recipe. It kind of generates its own recipe. That's like a more complicated project. Now going back to a simple project, maybe if I give you 5 ingredients, you can predict what the 6th ingredient should be. Like, hey, these things always go together in these dishes. So here's the most likely thing. That's a simple prediction problem. You know, multi-class, like what ingredient should come in. So there's so many things, whether it's natural language processing or just simply visualization, which requires no hardcore data science or math. It's just exploring the data. There's so much that can be done. So I just want to emphasize, like, yes, you can read the Breaking the Data Science guide. There's a lot of Coursera classes. There's all kind of resources out there on the internet for free. But if you don't build, it won't be worth shit. You have to build.
For experienced candidates, at least specifically in the data science domain, let's say they are making a job switch. So how can they decide, like, in their new job role in the new company, will it be exciting, the role will be challenging and full of learnings? How they can actually decide it?
Yeah, man, that's tough, right? Because there's an information asymmetry outside of the company. You don't know what's happening. So, I mean, that's why you got to check out Reddit. You got to check out Blind, you know, these different forums. You can go, don't be hesitant to ask people who are at the company or who have left the company for a reference check. You can see on LinkedIn who's worked at the company in the past and reach out to them and kind of be like, hey, I saw you work there like 6 months ago and you left. Like, how was it? You know, why'd you leave? People are actually surprisingly willing to talk to you. So this, again, goes back to that whole cold email thing. Like, you can reach out. So, and on LinkedIn will tell you who used to work at this company. And then you can say, oh, did you get laid off? Are they doing a lot of layoffs? Or they're like, oh, no, this company is really great. It's just that I decided to start my own company. You know, that's like a great sign. That's like, oh, this is a good company. So I think that's one thing. Second thing is, you know, definitely go for a company. I use the engineering blog also to understand, you know, are these people active? Are they doing stuff in open source? Are they like talking about things? Are they working on actual technical problems? So that's something else I use to actually understand if this is a good opportunity. Third is, I think people should interview widely. All things equal, if you just talk to 10 companies, you'll have a better sense of which are the 2 or 3 that are best. Versus if you only applied to 4 companies, then you don't know. So I think this is where one of those things you have to talk widely as well. Lastly, this is a fun one on LinkedIn. You can just see how much a company has been hiring and like what their employee headcount's been and like what their growth's been. So if you can see a company's been hiring a lot of people recently, I think that means the company's doing good and they're really growing, which means there's probably a lot of scope there's a lot of work to be done and there's chances to get promoted more easily. And the last one is I look at who's funded a company. If it's backed by some really good venture capitalists who have a good track record for success, like Sequoia or KPCB or SoftBank, and they've been investing in these kind of companies and at good valuations, and the valuations have been increasing, that might be a good signal that, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on, there's a lot of money, they can pay well, and there's a lot of opportunity. So those are some of the ways, but I wish I had a better way. And then lastly, you just ask your, towards the end. In the beginning of the interviews, you just interview nicely, but towards the end, when you're talking to a hiring manager or they're trying to sell you on it, you're close to the end, you can ask them like, hey, what are some of the projects people are working on? How's it going? At that point, you can kind of assess like, oh, are these really boring projects, or they don't know what they're doing, or oh, there's so much to be done, and And same way when assessing a role, sometimes people will know like, hey, what are the first, what do you think some of the first projects would be, or like what's the scope? Because it's so funny, people take a job and there's like a job description posted, but what they actually end up doing is different, because just by the time of putting the JD, that's more like standardized, templatized, to hey, talking to a hiring manager 2 months later, or 6 weeks later, things can change a lot, and they're like, oh yeah, we just wrote that in the JD, but like actually it's more like this is the role. Unless you ask, and it's surprising, these things can change, maybe not at a big company, but definitely at a small company that's moving fast. The JD might have been written by HR or someone else or the director, but then by the time you talk to the hiring manager, they're like, no, the job's a little different actually. So you just got to talk to people. I don't have any foolproof way.
Now, Nick, we are in the end of our podcast. So before wrapping up this entire session, any final advice for the audience who is watching this video?
Absolutely, yeah. So thanks so much for having me. But my final advice would be like, one thing I've learned in my own career is the world is a very malleable place, meaning it's actually can be shaped and things are not as rigid as they seem, okay? And day by day, the world gets crazier, the world moves faster, and traditional credentials or where you live, what language you speak gets less and less important. And what gets more and more important is what you can actually do. So I'll give you an example, like, I'm not an English major. I'm not someone who is very good at writing, but somehow I was able to write a best-selling book. Why is that? I don't have it's self-published. It's because Amazon has Amazon self-publishing that allows anyone to write a book, and these resources allow me to be able to put out a pretty good book, even though I'm not like an English major or someone who's like grown up writing and always wanted to dream of writing a book. Shit, I wouldn't even comment my code. Like, that's how much I didn't like writing. I wouldn't comment my code correctly. So why did I, write documentation? How do I write a book? So I just want to let people know, like, but I just put my mind to it and I was able to do it, And same way, right at the beginning of the interview, you asked, like, hey, why are you a data scientist now? And I'm like, well, I always was one. And I'm also a software engineer. And some days I'm a data engineer. But some days I'm an author. And some days I'm a businessman. And some days I'm a DJ, right? It's the world who tries to put you in your place and box you in and say, hey, if you're a software engineer, you can't learn ML. Or if you're doing this, unless you've done differential equations, you can't learn ML. Or unless you've done this, you can't do a data exploration, But the world is a very malleable place. And I know a lot of people deal with that same thing about like, hey, I'm in this country, what do I do? Or I don't have much money, how do I learn? These days, resources are free. So it's up to you to learn. It's the willingness to learn that's scarce. The resources are not scarce anymore, right? And same way, people worry about like hiring and visas and all kinds of stuff. And it's just sort of like, hey, the world has become a lot more global. There's so much tech throughout the world. Platforms like Upwork allow you to work and freelance for companies outside of your own home country. And I'm going to just point to crypto, which I think is a really good beacon. I'm not like someone who's crazy into cryptocurrencies, but these days, cryptocurrency companies pay you in cryptocurrencies, and they don't care where where you are in the world, because there's not that much legal or contract. They're just like, hey, put out some commits, we'll pay you some cryptocurrency, it's fine. And we might not even know you, you're just some random person on GitHub, And I think the world is tending towards that, where you live doesn't matter as much, how much money you had doesn't matter as much, which school you went to doesn't matter as much, right? So even if you didn't go to a tier 1 school, there's so much opportunity to be had, and nothing's stopping you from going to Coursera and learning from Stanford and Berkeley for free, MIT. That's all available today for free. You don't have to go to a top school to learn from some of these top schools. That's all free. This book, in US is $30. In India, we'll price it at around 1,600 rupees. Sure, maybe it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but having this kind of like world-class problems, 20 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible, but now it is. So I just want to let people know, as the world gets more crazy, moves faster, barriers go down, it's up to people to realize the world's more malleable, and you don't have to buy into the thing of like, oh, because I'm this type of person, or because I live here, or because I went to a tier 3 college, I'm limited in any way. You know, it's the world's a much more malleable place than you're led to believe. So I just want to let people know that and tell them to trust themselves and just keep focusing on working.
And yeah, that's what we had for this amazing podcast. I hope you guys would have enjoyed it, whatever Nick has suggested. And I think this interview, especially for the aspiring data scientists who will keep pinging me to cover something related to it. And here is it. So just make sure to like this video as well. Connect with Nick as well. All the social media links in the description. Check out the book, connect with him. You can put up your queries. And from my side and from my audience side, big thanks, Nick, for joining this podcast and sharing your wonderful experience with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun.
That was all in this podcast, guys. I hope you would have enjoyed it. And if you did, then make sure to give a like and share this video. And if you're new to my channel, then do subscribe and press the notification icon. And don't forget to comment whatever you feel about this podcast, improvements, suggestions, put it in the comment section. I will see you guys in the next weekend. Till then, just stay safe, stay home, take care of yourself and your family too.